You are listening to Influencers from the Conference Board.
Hello, my name is JP Kuehlwein, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to another edition of this Influencers podcast brought to you by the Conference Board. And today I will be talking to Michael Boumendil, who is a pioneer in audio branding and the founder, president, and chief creative officer of SixiemeSon, the world's leading audio branding agency since 1995. Michael, thank you for joining us on the Influencers podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I would like to introduce you as more than an industry player, because truly you are a pioneer when it comes to the use of sound in branding. And I use the word sound with intent rather than music. Can you take us back to those early 90s and tell us, how did you discover a link between sound and how we experience brands?
Well, I have to say that I never really discovered this. It was inside of me. For me, music is not something that is just entertaining. It's a language. And when I was studying marketing, when I was much younger, for me, it was clear that everything that a brand was using created an influence. And my feeling was that the way brands were using music or sound was not the best way. There was another approach, and finally I decided to invent this new approach. Not a vision about music as something nice, but something that really helps people understand the brand, and also a way for the brands to get a better experience.
So you were a marketer before you were a musician, or vice versa?
I was a musician before being a marketer. I started playing the piano. I was something like 7. I started composing. I was 11. And it became kind of serious. Too serious for my parents, I have to say, when I was 16, because I decided not to accept a contract that a record company was offering at that time. But music came before. And as long as I can remember, music for me was my language. It was a strong language and a strong emotional language.
But then your parents sent you to business school?
Yeah, I have to say, be a nice guy, be a serious guy. But when I was done with my studies, I decided to found SixiemeSon.
So you go to business school, you find this linkage in your mind. What were the steps from there to actually working on a brand? How do you even approach clients with this new idea?
Well, I have to say that it came from a friend of mine was a marketer. He was a little bit older than I was. And he said, okay, we have to choose a music for a TVC. And then I discovered the approach and I say, well, that's complete nonsense. You should not care about how nice you feel this music is, because it's not about being nice. It's about being strong. It's about helping your brand get more success. So I say, okay, let's try and define something that is really specific. I also have to say that at that time, it was very usual that people were using famous music. But the problem with this kind of music is you can pick it up. You will pay a lot of money, but another brand coming 1 week after, 1 month after, could do exactly the same thing. Can you afford to have plenty of brands using the same material? That's complete nonsense also. So through this first experience, it was clear to me that the methodology and the approach to sound and music by brands at that time was not as strong as it could have been.
Now, I worked at Procter & Gamble. We used a ton of music in our commercials. I guess the tough sale must be, how did you show them that there could be results, maybe even measurable results, in terms of the impact on the equity of their brand or their sales?
That's a key question. And from the very beginning of SixiemeSon, I have to say that we've been paying a lot of attention to that topic. And we're investing a lot of money. Because it takes us back to this key question: what does it mean to be successful in sonic branding or audio branding? We are measuring a lot of things. Let me be clear about 2 examples. The first thing, I believe today, what sound can do is bring more attention to what brands are doing. So for instance, we are measuring, particularly through neuro testing, the difference between before our solution and with our solution when it comes to attention. We are observing people. We are doing some kind of eye tracking, face tracking, and we are comparing. So, okay, this is the TVC with the music done by SixiemeSon. This is the music with the TVC that you intended to take or pick up the kind of hit music you wanted to have.
TVC standing for commercial, television commercial.
Commercials. Yep. And we are measuring the difference. There's another thing. I remember that we started for Samsung like 20 years ago when we defined their global sonic branding. We had two panels, one without our solution and the other panel with our solution. And we were asking people to talk not about the music, but talk about their feeling about the brand when the visual identity was coming without our sound and with our sound. And it was a tremendous difference.
So there is qualitative and quantitative measurement involved and possible. Now, Michael, that sounds really interesting. Is there an opportunity for us to maybe listen to an example?
Yeah, that's the best way to start.
Excellent.
This is the sonic ID of Samsung. And that's the brand new AXA sonic logo. This is the sonic ID of the consulting firm McKinsey. This is the audio logo of Michelin. Michelin, the tire and guide company. This is the audio logo of Renault, the car manufacturer. And this is the audio logo of SNCF. And of course, these are only audio logos because it's. I don't want to take you too much time, but we are building systems, and systems are going much beyond that.
I remember you talking to me about creating the sound for the French railroad, SNCF. And that's a very iconic sound that I want you to talk about in a second. But it seems to me that there is a whole plethora of sounds and music involved. You already talked about the music in TVC, in commercials. We obviously know the famous jingles, da-da-da-dong. SNCF is another story. Can you lead us a little bit through how you think about the dimensions of sound and what the touch points can be?
When you look at the different brands SixiemeSon is working for, you would be surprised to see that you have almost half B2B and half B2Cs. Why? Because today's sound is just everywhere, both for B2B and B2C brands. Let's be clear. You can have the usual things like TV commercial, okay, radio message, okay. But sound is also like a customer center service on the phone, and you have plenty of messages.
The waiting time, for example? You
have every company, the smallest and the biggest, they have like their YouTube page, plenty of videos. Events.
The stores.
App, the application. Not to mention that we are entering in a moment of the brand history where screens are becoming smaller, but the attention to sound is not becoming strong. And I'm thinking about the vocal assistant world. The only way for you as a brand to exist is to have a strong sonic branding vocabulary to situate that. When people are listening to the vocal assistant and your application, they don't think about Alexa or Google, whatever. They think about your brand.
So the voice, the sounds, everything is important, just like in anything in branding, to be recognizable, to be distinct, to become iconic if possible.
As possible, yeah.
Now, those are a lot of dimensions. We just mentioned a ton of touch points, and there are many more. If a brand is a novice in this area, and many still are, how should they go about this? Is there a brief at the beginning? Is there a logic first step?
The first thing is to avoid a big misunderstanding. It's not about music. It's not about sound. It's about branding. Sonic branding, audio branding, first and foremost, is about branding. So if you think about building a very good brief, think about the brand. We need to know the brand, its positioning, values, history, strategy, vision. We need to know, and I have to say that at SixiemeSon, so we're completely obsessed by this. We're obsessed by the fact that we are building a competitive edge. So we need to know more about the competitors because we need to analyze what they do, with sound, to what extent they have good ideas or bad ideas. How can we make our sonic strategy something that helps the brand be stronger than the competitors? We need to know the customers, and we need to know the touch points. So most of the time, we will do an audit, but we need to have the brand on board saying, okay, who we are, who are the competitors, who are the customers, and what is the system we will be building about sound. This is it. This is a right brief about sonic branding.
Gotcha. And you have worked for Babybel, the cheeses, Huggies, the diapers, SNCF, I would like you to talk about that in a sec, the railroad, Roland Garros, tennis tournament, McKinsey. It couldn't get more diverse. How do you approach a McKinsey versus a cheese?
Then again, all these brands, the smallest, the biggest, they have a history. They have their positioning. They have a story to tell. Every story is different. And you know, for example, today we are working for like 4 airline companies. At the same time. There's no chance that the solution at the end will sound the same or look the same. Why? Because they have really, really different stories, different positioning, different identities. You know, you can compare our job with the job done by the big branding agencies. We could talk about, I don't know what, Wolf is a branding agency. You could talk, okay, what are they doing? They are just trying to convey the right message through everything that is about visual, shapes, color, typeface, whatever. And it all stems from the brand. You know, I remember when we started to work for Cartier, they started to talk about the luxury standards. And we said, okay, it's good to know the luxury standards, but we want to see to it that we are not there because we want to be different. Tell us your story. And they have a very specific story.
So you're not thinking, oh, this is airline category, this is event category, this is consulting, and already have a certain type of sound in mind. You really totally start with the brand, its personality, and 4 different airlines can develop entire different soundscapes.
Correct.
Excellent.
And they have to.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned brand agencies and I guess ad agencies before because you talked about the visual element and it's very dominating, I would say, in this world, including on the small screen now. Do you work with them? Do you work against them? Do you try to be a full service agency? How is your relationship with the other agency partners of your brand clients?
Well, along the years, the collaboration with the agencies has become, I would say, much easier. Why? Because this is not a job for an advertising agency, because most of the clients, they have more than advertising. You know, you cannot ask an advertising agency to work on your sonic strategy for phone messages. This is really specific, and it's a key expertise. We have some research on this showing how much the right music for on-whole message changes people's opinion about the quality of service of these kind of touch point with a brand. So advertising is one of the key touch points for some of our clients. So we are at the disposal of the advertising agency, and we finally see to it that what we do for them, for this client, is also very coherent with the rest of the system that we are building. And that's the same for branding agencies.
Right. And from what I understand, the approach with that collaboration then changes from an agency hiring a contractor who does music to create some scores for their ad to people who are uniquely and only focused not on music, but on bringing the brand to life in audio. Because your employees, and you have employees, you don't have contractors, your employees are fully dedicated to audio, is what I understood.
Yes, and I have to say we have no choice. Success requires such a high level of expertise. And I think your example is great. I have a lot of friends that are musicians, and sometimes they work for advertising. their brief is about music, and they're here to please somebody with a nice music that conveys a good emotion. This is not what we're aiming at. What we are aiming at is, okay, to what extent this music will have people that are not paying attention to the TV set because they're doing something else. To what extent this music will grab their attention. Another thing we are aiming at, okay, to what extent this music will give a clear idea of the added value that this brand is offering to its customers. And a lot of things that I have to say are more marketing, business-oriented. We are not aiming at having people saying, okay, that's a cool brand. No, we want people to engage with the brand. We want people we want brands to stand out. It's not about business. It's not about pleasing me. It's about, okay, wow, that's interesting.
And your sounds and your music are not just pieces that you watch passively, right? I mean, you organize or you work with event organizers, for example, or you work in store, and there the sound truly accompanies the action, right? I think you told me about this event in Monaco where you have a different sound and music for people walking up on stage to receive their awards, and then you have a different music for presenting the particular feature, etc., etc. So it's really sound in motion and in the physical context as well.
Yes, and it takes me back to a sentence. I'm trying to remember this sentence. You talked about the job we did for Huggies, the diapers.
Yes.
And Angela Johnson was the boss of Ogilvy at that time, and we worked with her. And she told me, wow, what I like with the music is not that it's better for the commercial, it's transforming the brand. And transformation, I believe that's the key role of branding.
All right. I want to switch gears a little bit, but stay with your clients that you just mentioned. I know budgets are super tight. On the other hand, brands are expanding across categories, new launches constantly, and globally, and across all these touch points that we talked about, from the internet to voice to classic commercials. How can you deliver a product in time and so global in every respect and on budget? Are there some tricks in this trade to achieve that? And original music?
So the first trick is we have no subcontractor. And we have a very strong expertise that is ours. It means that nobody's taking any markup, or we are not taking any markup on anything, I have to say. But the key thing for me is, and it would take me back to the case of AXA, the leading insurance company. Before us, every year they were buying from $2 million to $5 million licensing pieces of music. Why? Because they have plenty of commercials around the world, and they need music. It was every time they were starting from scratch, I have to say. But at the end of the day, the amount of money they were putting there was kind of significant. When we started to build our own system with more consistency and more coherence, no need to pay like dozens and dozens of
you own the
licenses.
music. They own the music in the end.
But most of the time, they are saving money with something that is 100 times more effective. And it's been now, we will be celebrating this year 10 years of collaboration.
So you are their sound manager, and you have developed this library that your client owns versus having to buy the rights every time.
When I see what's going on, I remember a meeting when they were introducing their different agencies. They say, okay, Publicis is our advertising agency. I don't remember who was their branding agency at the time. And they say, okay, SixiemeSon is our sonic branding agency. And it was clear that around the table we were all the talented people supposed to work together with AXA.
Right. And now you told me a little example that I wanted to just get on tape, because I found it fascinating, on how you are global and how you can create original music and sound and still make it work with a budget, and that is this remote directing of a symphony orchestra. Can you give us the 1 minute or 30-second version of that? Just it blew my mind. It blew my mind.
Well, I have to. So you know that SixiemeSon is in plenty of countries. The two big offices in Paris and New York, but we are in plenty of countries. And sometimes, if I believe there's a talent that we need to have, and that is not there exactly in the team, so we go there. And we have a fabulous orchestra in Moldavia. And Moldavia, yeah. We love them. And they understood our the way we work. And it was like 2 weeks ago. We needed to do a big orchestra recording very quickly because the client realized that the deadline he gave us was not the right one. So we had to go very fast. So we've been conducting this orchestra through Skype, and it was super effective. And that's the way it is.
Remote conducting.
Exactly, remote conducting. And it worked really, really perfectly.
Now, I can imagine it's a win-win because even if it's a low budget for you, it's a ton of money in Moldavia. And so everyone's happy, and it's an ongoing collaboration.
But beyond this, you have to listen to...
It's a quality orchestra.
And because they used to work... We used to working with them. They used to working with us. We were working with them for a Russian brand some months ago. So it was cool. But I have to say that nothing is prohibited in our business. Everything that could be interesting for the brand is interesting for us.
All right. I want to switch gears a little bit again. And something I read just a week ago about research that showed that depending on the music playing in a fashion store, people will consider a garment soft and comfortable and worthy to buy or not. But it also depends on the type of floor that is in the store, which blew my mind in terms of how complex it then gets when you think about the senses. So I want you to talk about that. But first of all, we'll have to take a little break for some quick announcements by the conference board, and we'll see you on the other side.
Can you, your team, or your company benefit from insights such as the ones provided in this podcast? They are immediately available when you join the conference board, a membership-based think tank that delivers trusted insights for what's ahead. Reaching across industries and geographies, we bring together our noted experts, senior executives from the world's largest companies, and nonpartisan practical research to help you address your most important business issues. Our membership packages are tailored to your organization's unique needs and budget. To learn more about our offerings, go to www.conferenceboard.org and click Join on the top bar to connect with one of our product specialists.
Hello and welcome back to our conversation with Michael Boumendil, the founder and president of audio branding agency SixiemeSon. So, Michael, about that German study with carpets and clothes and sound, it seems to me that it's getting complicated. Do you account for, let's say, the in-store furniture and the kind of product that's being sold when you think about the audio for a store?
Just let me tell you how logical this is. You will not have the same opinion about what I'm telling you if my voice is not this one, but if it is this one. The way you dress has an influence on what people understand from you. It's not only about the words, it's also about how you can pronounce them. If you have an accent, it tells something about you. If you are coming with a swimming chair, or if you're coming with a nice and fancy, dress, and it's not the same feeling if your dress is like a kind of flashy red, or if it's like a very soft gray. Everything that we hear, everything that we see, everything that brings a kind of a emotion to us has an influence on the opinion you can make on a place, a person, whatever communication. So the same way we have I don't know how many research we have showing that the right sonic logo on a visual identity changes positively the understanding of the visual identity itself, meaning that the wrong choice will create a kind of misunderstanding or confusion on the visual identity. Everything is connected. So the research you're talking about for me is logical, and I believe the first fashion brand we've been working for, it was like 22 years ago, and this is just logical.
Gotcha. Now, you say, I think somewhere on your website, or I read in an article, that about 2 billion people hear some sounds created by you or by your agency every day.
Yeah, that's correct.
Which sounds fantastic, but at the same time, I wonder, is it an indication of us getting overwhelmed by sound? I remember, and I mentioned French Railway earlier, because I do remember when I took the French Railway and I heard these sounds when the doors open, when they close, the announcement, the soft voice. And I noticed it as a stark difference versus the railway I took in Germany, in the US, or elsewhere. But nowadays, with all brands attempting what you're trying to do, which is a soundscape as well, an audio identity, are we going to be overwhelmed in the end? Is it going to be too much? Do we need to close our ears?
I think what we're doing is exactly the opposite, because most of the time we are not creating the touch point that has sound with it. You know, I would tell you that the nice and right music for an on-hold message is better than the wrong one. But whatever you do, you have music there. That's the case for 90% of the touch points that are already existing. Sound is just everywhere. The difference is, what do brands do with that?
Okay. So you're saying the sound is there. It's a question of whether you account for it and steer it consciously, or whether you just let go?
Consciously and with a purpose.
Yeah.
I have to say that it cannot, it's just, it takes us back to maybe 40 years ago when it was the beginning of the graphic guidelines. You had visuals everywhere, but it was not consistent, was not coherent, it was not helping create some kind of differentiation. But today the competition is fierce, and the customers are more demanding. You have to see to it that what you do from a sonic point of view creates value for the brand and for the customers. And
what about those poor people in the store who have to listen to the same music 500 times? Are they still going to be inspired by that?
So if it's 500 times, it means that the people in charge of the music are not doing what they should. You know, it's just like when you go to an airport. We are in charge of some big airports around the world. And there is a moment when you can have plenty of messages. It can be overwhelming if you don't pay attention. But if you do the things right, you are not overwhelming. You are informing people. You are giving the right information, the right place, in the right, I would say, sonic experience.
Gotcha. And how about yourself and your employees? I think some of them have been with you for over a decade. You've probably been working on thousands of pieces of sound. How can you still tell a client that their brief is inspiring and that you have some great, unique ideas in your mind? How do you avoid that you yourself fall into a mold and repeat over and over?
That's the reason why I'm still there, because I'm still having fun, because it's still super exciting. And you know, for example, let me take you to some journeys I've been through during this last month. I was in Texas for an amazing company about insurance and banking for the military world. It's a strong universe. I have no other client like this. We are starting to work for a soccer team in Switzerland that has a very, very unique way of approaching their relationship with their community. Never been through this. And going back to the airline companies we're working for now, each of them has a different story, and that's super exciting. I'm excited about branding because branding is about transforming, and then again, I tell you that's my philosophy. Not only for the success of brand, that's key, but also for a better experience for people. It's always enjoyable and exciting to help people have a better experience.
One of the challenges of branding is there is the cultural context that a brand lives in. and sometimes that context or let's say the brand's message and appearance doesn't translate and or is not read in the same way by people in different cultures. Do you encounter the same thing in sound? And how do you adjust is there an Asian way of listening versus an African way of listening versus an American way of experiencing sound?
There is, but you have to understand that it's about branding. So, for instance, you have brands that have the same positioning around the world, and the question is to see to that it's working when and where we are using our material. But you have brands that have different positioning, a kind of, I would say, global, local segmentation of their positioning, meaning that we will just be translating. I could talk about Michelin. Michelin is one of our clients. It's been like 13 years that we're working globally for them. Michelin is a global brand, but can have some slightly different positioning according to their product. The tire is not exactly what you have on the restaurant guide, of course. But also, the needs for Michelin is not exactly the same in China, where people are buying Michelin for their robustness. And here in the United States, Michelin is a brand you really can rely on, and you can have like a kind of sportive way of driving. It has a grip. You can rely on Michelin. This is not exactly the same. When you are in a Scandinavian country with ice on the roads, the reason why you take Michelin is not exactly the same. So we are adapting our musical vocabulary to this positioning, because then again, it all stems from the brand and the brand positioning. I have to say that we have in the team two people that are really and exclusively working on this strategic planning and global approach. You have some cultures that, well, we need to adjust a little bit our vocabulary to see that it's working properly. But we have this experience. I mean, it's been like 20 years that we have clients around the globe. And I was talking about Samsung. Samsung, when we created the sonic branding system for Samsung, it was like maybe 2003, and we did research in so many countries. Yes, we have this experience. It's not a big deal.
Talking about tires, I think about cars, and thinking about cars, I remember an advertisement. Actually, I think it was for Volkswagen, even though it was probably inspired by Rolls-Royce, about an engineer opening and closing the doors 100 times to make sure it sounded just right. Have you crept into the car and closing the door business as well already?
Yes, but this is one of the contrasts. I cannot say anything about it.
Fortunately, I have to say, because we need to close the door as well on this podcast. I was just teasing you. This was super interesting, Michael. I guess for our audience, if a brand is interested, and many of them might be inspired by what we just talked, where should they start? How can they connect with you or SixiemeSon to get a little bit more information and to orient themselves in this space?
I would say that there's a book from Colin Fahey called simply Audio Branding, and that's a good way to start.
That's audio branding published by Kogan Page.
Correct.
Yes.
I think people should think about branding. Sonic branding, you have experts like we are, but really starting there is about stopping thinking about music as just entertainment, thinking about music as a way to convey the right message to the right audience. That's the way it is.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you again for this grand tour of how to build and use audio in your brand building. And you, dear listener, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, then consider to subscribe to Influencers and also explore the rest of our podcast offerings here on the Conference Board website at conference-board.org/podcast. And with that, I want to say goodbye and tune out here on a good note. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This has been Influencers from the Conference Board.